Question: It is said that the world is on the ox. Can you explain this? Answer: This is a matter found in some old religious works. There are two aspects. I will only relay the words as they were written, recorded, and transmitted. There are 2 points. First, if such a statement was said, how it is perceived and its meaning should be understood. Second, its actual meaning. Firstly, in reliable hadith books, there is no hadith that says, "The world is on the back of an ox." But many great scholars and sages almost unanimously agree that such a statement exists. Even Ibn al-Kathir, one of the distinguished students of Ibn Taymiyyah's school, who was very meticulous and careful in criticizing hadiths, explains in his exegesis of the al-Qalam Surah, at the very beginning, in great detail what the world rests upon. In his explanation, we see the desert, the rock, the ox, and the fish. This means that even if the statement did not reach us in exactly this form, the greatest scholars, even the critics, have carefully addressed this issue and tried to explain it. So, there are two aspects. First, when the Prophet said this, he intended it metaphorically, but those who received the statement often took it literally. For example, a senior scholar gives illustrations. He says, "When I was a child, there was a lunar eclipse. It was slightly visible. I asked my mother, what happened? She said, the moon was swallowed by a snake. I was amazed, of course. I asked, how can a snake swallow the moon? What kind of snake? It was still visible. The snakes in the sky are transparent, so their insides are seen. If such a metaphor is perceived as literal by the people, then interpretations, exegeses, and additions follow. In fact, this statement contains a truth, but it was expressed metaphorically. According to the zodiac, the moon is eclipsed when it enters the Tinian constellation, which means the snake. I do not have the capacity to explain the long astronomical aspect. Scholars who specialized in this matter said that the eclipse happens because the moon enters the snake constellation, enters the snake's mouth. Ordinary people really thought that the moon was literally swallowed by the snake. This is how the metaphor came about. The guide also narrates another metaphor. In Sahih Muslim, we see a hadith. While the companions were sitting with the Prophet, a noise was suddenly heard. The Messenger of Allah said it was the sound of a stone that had been rolling in hell for 70 years. A few minutes later, someone came in and said, "O Messenger of Allah, the famous 70-year-old hypocrite has just passed away." If this event did not recur, the Prophet's metaphorical statement would have been taken as literal. Hell would have been imagined like a stream, and it would have been thought that occasionally stones rolled down the stream and made noise. The metaphor would have been taken as literal truth. It is reported that the Prophet once said, "The earth is on the ox," and at another time, "on the fish." The meaning of this is as follows: just as we say, "What does the state rest upon?" we answer, "The sword and the pen." But the state does not literally rest on the sword or the pen. There is a meaning behind it. The army rests on weapons, the officials and scribes of the state rest on the pen. If administrative work stopped, even swords would be useless, and the material and spiritual state would be finished. When we say that the state rests on the sword and pen, we mean it metaphorically. But ordinary people imagine that the state literally rests on the sharp point of a pen or the edge of a sword. Likewise, the Prophet said, "The world rests on the ox and the fish." Some people live by the sea, some on land. Tractors appeared in the 20th century. Since the time of Adam, everything was done with oxen and plows. Seeds were sown that way. Particularly, cattle were very important for Muslims living on land, both for plowing and for meat and protein. Muslims, people, essentially continued their lives depending on these. When the Prophet said, "The world rests on the ox," he meant that if the ox does not work, if the cow does not give birth, if it does not provide milk, human livelihood would be finished. He spoke metaphorically, but the general public misunderstood when he said, "The world rests on the fish." For those living on the coast, if the fish did not lay thousands or millions of eggs each year, providing abundant fish, coastal life would have ended. Even today, these two resources are still very important for social life. They are cultivated in lakes and ponds to give new vitality to economic life. Fish are produced abundantly, cattle are raised abundantly. The situation has not changed much today. The world still rests on the ox and the fish. Do you understand this? That is one aspect. Another aspect is the celestial constellations. When we look at the sky atlas, we see them. In the sky atlas, for example, we call some the Great Bear, Little Bear, Dog constellation, etc. These are constellations also. As the Earth completes its cycle according to the constellations, it passes through different positions. Some are called the Fish constellation, some the Ox constellation. This is also reported in newspapers. At that time, astronomy was not very developed, so the words of the Prophet were not fully understood. Until that time, it was thought that the sun revolved around the Earth, and constellations were understood in that way. When he said, "It rests on this," the meaning was difficult to grasp. Now we know that the sun